Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Go With Your Gut podcast. I am your host, Lauren Dreyer, and today we are talking about labels. And I'm not talking about the label that you put on a drawer or a container or something like that to help your organizational skills. Don't get me wrong, those labels are great and they help efficiency. I am talking about labels that we put on ourselves, labels that we put on others, labels that we put on relationships or honestly just things in general because we need to make sense of them. We need to we need to know where to put them in our honestly our lives. But it starts with us as an individual. And so many times a lot of different labels get put on us all the time, growing up from different people, from different places. And some of them weren't even meant to be a label. Maybe somebody you grew up with that was a person of influence, maybe a leader of some sort, a mentor of some sort, family member, whoever that person was. And they just made a comment and said something about you that maybe it was directly towards you or maybe it wasn't. And somehow you heard that. And regardless of how they meant it, you internalized it and somewhere it took root in you. And sometimes when that happens and we we don't really know what it means for us, or we're not maybe old enough to know how to take it. We're like, yeah, okay, if they said it about me, it absolutely must be true. So think about what labels either you put on yourself or somebody around you put on yourself, because some of those labels probably need to peel off and go away, fall to the ground, be put in the trash because they they're not true. And sometimes when people put labels on us, we, like I said, internalize it and then it becomes part of who we are. So maybe somebody at some point called you um, loud or lazy or rude. Um, maybe direct. And you thought, yeah, okay, I I am these things. So all of a sudden you just that took root and you said, yeah, that's who I am. So I guess that's how I have to be, not knowing that you necessarily did that. Instead, and maybe they didn't even mean it like that. They were just making a simple comment. Or on the flip side of that, maybe they meant it as a good thing. Some of those things probably aren't great things. Or maybe they were making an observation and they had absolutely no idea um, why you were being those things. And that's why they were making the comment. But because you heard it, you internalized it, and all of a sudden, that's just how you started to act. We have absolutely no idea where we hear some of these things, but all of a sudden, however many years later, you say that's just how I am because once upon a time, maybe somebody put that label on you when in all reality, it's not true and you can take it off. Or somebody could have said something to you and you took it negatively when in fact they didn't mean it like that. What you could do is, even if they don't mean it like that, you can shift that thinking a little bit and say, well, I don't know how it was meant, but I'm going to take that as a good thing and switch that for yourself. Flip it and turn it to a good thing so that maybe you can change that piece and say, well, whether that be true or not, I'm going to take that as a good thing. Um, maybe somebody called you too bold and or too loud, and you're like, well, I don't know how you meant that. I don't know if it's a good or a bad thing, but regardless, I'm going to take it as a good thing because it means I go for what I want. It means I ask for what I want, something to that extent, and make it a positive instead of a negative, degrading thing. Or if somebody says something to you and puts a label on you, sometimes those things are projections, and it's something that that person feels about them, but they don't want to admit it. And so you can just let that fall right off. You don't have to accept it. Nobody can make you accept they can't make you accept being called something. You have to say, yeah, you're right, instead of, no, I know myself. That's not me. Now you have to sometimes turn the mirror a little bit, and if it's true and you get maybe defensive about something, maybe take that into consideration. But those kinds of names are not the only things that we put labels on ourselves for. But think about the fact that sometimes we put labels on other people, whether it be somebody that we're in a relationship with, a friend, romantic, um, professional, whatever the case may be, familial relationships. We can still put labels on other people who are in our families. And half the time, I feel like this is easier because we know them so well, right? But be careful about putting labels on others when you have absolutely no idea. And, that could be completely wrong. And then all of a sudden, that that label becomes something, and all of a sudden maybe that relationship is ruined because they don't know why you're all of a sudden acting like something towards them, or maybe you're angry with them when in turn they didn't do anything. So let labels fall off of you, or just take them off, but also be careful of what you put on others, because I think we do that a lot in order to just make sense of the situation, or just put a label on it so that we can put it somewhere in our mind and move on. Another thing that I have noticed that we do is we put labels on relationships because in order to know how to act in them, we need to know what they are, right? We need to know um, we need to know if we're on the same page, and we don't know how to act if we don't know what the relationship is. And these days, that can mean a lot of different things. In the old days, it was, we like to act like it was black and white, but I don't know that it necessarily was. But these days, there's so many different kinds of relationships, whether that be, um, a family member or somebody that you would consider family, whether it be, again, a romantic relationship or a friendly relationship, or something that comes from a professional setting. We don't know how to proceed in a relationship, or in fact, if it's going somewhere. But you don't necessarily have to label it how anybody else would, just to put a label on it. That to me would say you need to have a conversation about what you both want and what you both expect out of the relationship. And then you can put a label on it. But be careful doing that with relationships just to do it. It needs to come from what you both want moving forward, rather than I just need to know. And as soon as you have that conversation and can put that label on there, then both of you can move forward. And, you're not always probably going to be happy with what that label ends up being, but at least it helps you to move forward and know what the other person wants. And maybe it won't be what you expect, because I find that that happens a lot. You don't know what that other person is thinking. You don't know what they expect out of that relationship. And that label ends up being something totally different than what you were originally thinking. Maybe better, maybe worse, but it will help you to make sense of relationships and people, and maybe it'll provide some clarity. But think about maybe the things that you do, your traditions, how you do things. We learn a lot of things growing up, and we just move into life as an adult thinking, well, of course, this is how it happens because this is how it's always happened. When instead, you can learn to go your own way. You can learn to do things differently. It doesn't have to be just how it's always been. And, that sometimes that's really hard to wrap your head around, because you think, well, this is how I grew up. And it's a change. It is a change from what you're used to, what you know. And you say, no, I don't want to change this because this is how it's always been. But be careful, because when you start working on processes, um, traditions, the way you do things, sometimes we put a label on either ourselves or others when we don't need to, because maybe it makes us, maybe we feel insecure to somebody, or whatever that case may be, or maybe we don't feel like we're good enough for somebody else. And so we put a label on ourselves, and we automatically say, I'm never going to live up to that. But is that the case? No. And when we do that, we automatically set ourselves, that situation, maybe that relationship, up for failure, because we didn't say, well, that's how I define myself, but maybe it's not how you need to. But everything we do needs a label, whether it be your position at work because you need that title, when in all reality, sometimes the titles don't mean as much. Does it mean something in the hierarchy of business? Maybe. But even if you have a leadership title, it doesn't mean that you can't be a leader. If you don't have that title, you can still be a leader. You can still absolutely have qualities of a leader and practice those. Just because you don't have that title, that label on yourself, doesn't mean that you can't do that. Heck, put that label on yourself, and maybe that one will come to fruition because you start acting like it. You can put good labels on yourself, like how capable you are, how driven you are, how empathetic you are. Maybe that bold and direct is a good thing because you go for what you want. Persistence is, albeit annoying to some people, it's also not a bad thing because it means you don't give up. So be careful what labels you put on yourselves, what labels you put on others, and make sure those are things that are going to make you move forward. I, say, yeah, absolutely, I'm this, and, I'm proud of it. It's a good thing. But watch yourself when you project labels, but think about how that affects you. Think about the labels that you put on yourself and if those are a good thing or not, or take them off, because a lot of times we put something on ourselves from when we grew up, and that doesn't necessarily need to be the case anymore. We can move on from that. We can take that right off and say, yeah, I don't think this is going to apply to me anymore. And when you can mentally take that off, a weight can lift off of you. And all of a sudden you can say, you know what, I can do this. I can make these steps. I can be driven. I can be, well off. I can do all these things. It it is such a mindset thing of whether you can or can't do something or how you are, because even if you'd say it's how I've always been, maybe it was a learned behavior that with work and practice and maybe changing some habits, you can shift those things. You can move away from those things that maybe you're not as proud of, or maybe you can learn to manage them a little bit and minimize it more. But think about what those things mean for you and how you want to see yourself in the future, and change around those labels. Figure out what you want to be, what you want to be known as, and the labels that you want, and work on peeling some of those off that you don't want and that can be peeled off. You may have to put some elbow grease in it. Um, you may have to work at a couple of layers, but it can probably be done with the encouragement, with the persistence, and with the knowledge that you can do it, but it has to be done by you. If you notice that you act like something, or if you have a quality that maybe you're not as proud of, and you say, I don't have to be like this, I'm not necessarily proud of this, think about if that is something that you can work yourself out of and take off that. Listen to that gut feeling and say, you know what? I'm I'm going to work my way out of this. Can it be done for everything? No, some things do just take management. But some things you can absolutely shift, switch, and take off of yourself. Hopefully some of this helped. Let me know what you think. Let me know if you have some labels that needed to come off. And as always, go with that gut and then keep on going.